Well, good afternoon and welcome back to another 30 Days Creative. It's another pretty nondescript day weather-wise, and actually the weather has played a little bit of a curveball in regards to my proposed plans for getting away this week. I am still planning on getting away, but the weather on the west coast of Ireland looks pretty diabolical. I'm actually going to head down to Newcastle. Newcastle is a very popular place for Northern Irish photographers around autumn time, down in Tullymore Forest. I've never found it that great, but at the same time, if the weather does kind of turn, at least we'll be in below some coverage of some foresty stuff. So the plan is to head out tomorrow. I've just spent today just getting the van ready. It's actually, always makes me laugh when I say this, it's on charge. The batteries are getting charged up a little bit. And hopefully head down tomorrow morning. So get a bit of an afternoon session maybe in Tullymore, and then a couple of sessions on Wednesday and Thursday. Maybe shake it up a bit and maybe head a bit further south and do something along the coast. But just looking forward to getting away. Now, given the fact that the weather is pretty shocking, it's not shocking, Nigel, it's actually quite mild. It's about 15 degrees. But it's not really, there's no real light. What we'll do is we'll skip from here back into the home office. I did talk on Friday's sort of 30 Days Creative that I wanted to start talking a little bit about how I kind of manage being on the road and sort of my workflow. And so what I thought I'd do today is just give you a little bit of a brief insight of how I manage the photography side of things while on the road, the good, the bad, and the downright frustrating. Shooting this little intro bit on the new iPhone and the video in cinematic mode. Well, that's a bit nice, isn't it? In fact, let's just see, I'm going to just, oh, look at that there. And then it goes back to my face. And what about clicking on there again? Back to me, come on, back to me. Oh, none too shabby. I'm quite impressed with this. Quite impressed indeed. Right, enough yabbering. Let's jump back to the office and I'll give you a little bit of an insight into a typical workflow when I'm on the road with my photos. Let's do that. So here we are back in the home office and still using the old iPhone with its pretty impressive face tracking. So my workflow when I'm on the road involves a couple of key pieces of hardware. Firstly, my MacBook. Secondly, an iPad. It's the 12.9 inch iPad Pro 2021. Now, I would love to say that I'm able to go iPhone or iPad only, and I really would love to be able to do that, but there are a couple of fundamental issues with workflow that require me to keep a kind of standard desktop, standard laptop in the fold. Now, the MacBook that I'm using is a late 2013 15-inch MacBook Pro, so it's coming up on 8 years old. In fact, I think it is about 8 years old now. And you know what? It's not too bad. It is suffering when I'm importing some of the H.265 footage from the new GoPro, which, by the way, the iPad eats for breakfast, no issue whatsoever. But as I say, there are a few fundamental issues, which is why I have to keep the MacBook. Now, I do have the little dongle that allows me to import from sort of micro SD and SD card. But one of the issues that I find importing directly to the iPad is keeping things synchronized across my library, across my main library. Now, you may be saying, but Nigel, with Lightroom Mobile and your Adobe subscription, your Adobe Cloud subscription, it of course will keep that synchronized. The main issue there is data usage. Now, when here in the UK, we have an unlimited data contract, but when we're traveling outside of the UK, we're very much limited to the amount of data that we can use. And so the last thing I want is uploading 50 megabyte raw files up to the cloud to then synchronize back to my main library, which is on the MacBook. The other limitation I find with Lightroom on the iPad is relating to the library. I haven't managed to find a way, the way Lightroom on my MacBook works, that when you remove or when you move the raw files onto an external storage unit, you can still link back to Smart Previews. Now, Lightroom Mobile does support Smart Previews, but I don't see an easy way to kind of do the edits, keep them locally on your iPad, and then move those off to an external drive and kind of have the library synchronize that external drive. Could be wrong here, and please do shout out below if you know a way to do that, because that would get me one step closer to perhaps going fully iPad only. So say my workflow for importing files is I import them first and foremost to my MacBook, to my main Lightroom library. So we'll open up Lightroom on the MacBook and we'll talk a little bit about that. Before we get started, this isn't going to be a deep dive into image processing or deep dive into the applications. I'll do that in a separate video. This is really just a high level workflow. Now, I don't have any images to import, so we'll just have to do the whole here's one I prepared earlier. And what I have in my Lightroom library on my MacBook is a smart filter called to process. It's just anything in yellow is to process. So say for example we had imported this particular file. It's an image taken from just a little sort of scratchy image from woodland up in Torridon. So this is an image that I want to say process on my iPad. Now, why am I wanting to do a lot of the sort of processing on the iPad? Well, it really comes down to battery life. As I said, I'm using a 2013 MacBook Pro, and while the battery was replaced a couple of years ago, I probably only get about 2 to 3 hours at most of working time on battery. Now, when we're on the road, coming across power can be one of the main challenges. Now, we have solar in the van. We have 12 volt charger for the MacBook, and I have an inverter as well that allows me to charge the MacBook when we're driving. But quite often we'll be, for example, we were in Scotland there for 3 or 4 weeks, and we don't move around a lot. And of course, you lose a lot of the sort of solar power during the winter months. And so I probably would only want to charge my MacBook if we were in a stationary position for say 2-3 days. I would probably only want to charge my MacBook off the internal leisure batteries at most twice. So if I can do a lot of the heavy lifting on the iPad, I'm obviously saving a lot of battery time on my MacBook. So this is why I kind of want to get those files across. So I pick the files, I've downloaded the files, and I'll say, right, here's images that I kind of want to maybe work on the iPad. Now at this point, I would have already done a lot of the metadata, so I've keyworded it and sort of maybe culled some of the sort of images that really didn't make the cut. And now, of course, what you can do is you can just hit the B button on your MacBook, and that will actually move that into a sync folder that will sync across to the iPad. Now what you can see here is on the image, it actually has a little sort of flashlight, or a flashlight, a little sort of lightning bolt, and that means that that file is actually already synchronized across. It is one that I've already done. But if we take, I don't know, let's take one of the images that isn't. So if we take this one here, an image from Torla, and I just hit the B button, you see that it adds to target collection sync. Now if I go up to that particular folder, you'll see now that that particular file is in here, and if I click on the cloud button, you'll see that actually it's syncing a couple of photographs. There probably was one other one in there that needed to be synced up as well. So what that's actually doing is, for those of you who don't know, it's not synchronizing the raw file, it's synchronizing the Smart Preview. So of course, right out of the bat, we're saving on data, we're saving on upload time, and so that allows me then to synchronize that. Now that will synchronize to the cloud, and then the next time that I have my iPad connected online, it will synchronize down. I would love it, as would thousands of other people I'm sure, if we could do local synchronizations. This would save us a heck of a lot of a headache, that you could actually set up a local area network between your MacBook and your iPad and local synchronize. That would be such a godsend in terms of using this. But right now we have to upload it to the cloud and then we download it onto our iPad. So what we'll do is we'll now jump onto the iPad. Right, so here we are now with the iPad open and we're on the sync folder. Now I've kind of synchronized actually two files across, one that I showed you and kind of one that I did in the background. So if we open up the one that I showed you, you see now that this is the smart preview. If I click on the little cloud button, it actually now says the preview is not editable. And this is actually an interesting point. So at the moment this file has synchronized across. You sort of look at it in your library and you think, great, that's synchronized across. But then you go to kind of edit it and you realize, hang on a minute, none of the buttons here are actually editable. None of these sort of options are editable. And so what it seems to do, and it's really frustrating, is that it does the synchronization. So say for example, you're synchronizing 10, 20 images across. You do the 20 images and you see the 20 images have gone across. You switch down your iPad, you clear off. You bring your iPad, you open your iPad up again, you go to edit the file and it's not editable because we haven't actually downloaded the actual raw smart preview yet. So what you need to make sure you do whenever you're synchronizing is you actually go into the file itself and it kind of does this almost secondary sync to allow you to do the edit. So if I open up this other file, so you'll see here hopefully, yeah, so you see that even though it looks like it was there for a split second, it actually wasn't editable. Now this becomes an issue if you've done a synchronization of say 20 images, switch off your laptop, and then when you come to open it up, you don't have any internet access. Now that can happen, I guess, if you jump on a plane, jump on a ferry or something, or you're on a train, I don't know, somewhere where you don't have cell coverage. And of course, quite often, I'll do the synchronization in a location where we have good connectivity, and then we'll clear off into the sort of the highlands of the back end of beyond that we don't have cell coverage. I'll open up my iPad, and the annoying thing is I can see the files, but I just can't edit them. So that can be a bit of a pain. So you've got to make sure that you get to the point where these options have actually sort of been highlighted so you can then do all of your edits. Now you can see this is a smart preview. You can see that this file has already had some edits done to it, and of course that smart preview will contain all of those edits. Similarly, if I make any changes to this file, those edits will be synchronized back up to the cloud and back up to my library as well. So you're kind of keeping the, this is what I'm saying about you're keeping the sort of your main library, which is on my MacBook, in sync. Now, if I click on here, you can see here adjustment changes pending to be synced. So obviously it's going to wait for a time period and then do the synchronization. Obviously, if I didn't have an internet connection, it would do the sync the next time. But the real downside here is making sure that you remember to click on each one of those images and kind of get it into an editable stage. The other issue I have found is, so all of these files here I've had down on my iPad and synced. Every so often, just randomly, one will lose its ability. In fact, what I'll do is I'm going to go up and, don't want to stop that. I'm going to go into settings and I'm going to disconnect the Wi-Fi. And let's just see whether any of these, you see? So here's an image that I have synchronized to the iPad before. I have edited it on the iPad, but you see now I can't edit it. And because I don't have an internet connection, there's nothing I can do. So this is a bit of a pain, and it just seems to be completely random. You see all these files are fine. I could edit all of these here, no issue whatsoever, no issue. Yeah, no problems. But if I was to then go back into my settings, let's get back onto our Wi-Fi connection. And let's go back to that one that was not able to be edited. And now that we've got an internet connection back in again, at some point, this has come back again. So that can really, it's caught me out on a number of occasions. And that's why I would love to see a local synchronization. Back on the iPad again. Now, another fantastic thing I love about editing on the iPad is just the tactile function. Now I have the smart keyboard with it. I guess one of the downsides with a smart keyboard, you can't kind of fold it back on itself. So if you want to use the tablet as a tablet, you've kind of got to take it off. But it's such a nice... I love editing with the pen and with sliders and with kind of my sort of just general fat fingers. It just makes for such a quite a pleasing sort of editing experience. And then of course, once I've sort of got to the point where I'm quite happy with editing, this will then synchronize those changes back up to my MacBook. Now, as I said, there are a couple of fundamental reasons why I don't think I can go iPad only. Few of those I've already spoken about, but also just from the editing workflow perspective. Lightroom Mobile at the moment does not support HDR merging or panoramic. Now, I do have a copy of, if we come off, hang on. If we come off and go into, I do have a copy of Affinity Photo. We'll talk about Affinity Photo in a completely separate vlog, but this does actually have a reasonably feature-rich options, raw editing, sort of all your usual sort of filters and various bits and pieces, but it also has focus merging, HDR merging, and panoramic merging as well. So there is an option there to do your sort of panoramic or your HDR merging on the iPad and then bring those into Lightroom. I'll talk about Affinity Photo and why. Nah. It's a dirty little secret that no one seems to talk about, but we'll talk about that in a different vlog. The other thing that you may have noticed, the sort of observant amongst you, so this is my synchronization folder on the iPad. Now, if I bring up a screenshot of the synchronize folder on my MacBook, I probably need to look up the term synchronization. Isn't that supposed to be keeping things? So what I've noticed is that from time to time they will get out of sync, and the only way I can really get them to sort of be back in sync again is to kind of remove them on the iPad completely. They don't seem to kind of just keep up the sync every so often, so that's just another thing to watch out for. So I think I'm going to have to bring this little spotlight a bit closer to me now. We're definitely losing a lot of that light. And of course the iPhone is starting to struggle a little bit. So I'll wrap this up pretty quickly. So that's my high-level overview of my workflow. No great surprises, I'm sure, but maybe just some other little bits just to bear in mind if you're thinking of kind of going down the Lightroom Mobile side of things as well. I'd say once you get into the editing side of things, and I'll have a separate vlog on the editing side of things, I actually find Lightroom Mobile pretty feature rich, as it's just missing a couple of different features. And of course, using things like Snapseed and things, I can never say that, Snapseed, is really good. And so I love the tactile function of the iPad. The one thing I would say is I haven't been as impressed with the battery life as I thought I would be. I really thought I was in for, a day of usage without it going sort of, down to 20-30%. And that has not been my experience. Certainly it's better battery life than my existing MacBook. But say, for example, I'm going to edit a vlog, for example. I could probably see my battery life going from 100 down to maybe 40-50% after a couple of hours of editing. Now, that's okay. Because of course, if I'm able to plug this in a normal wall outlet and have the fast charging, I can get that back up to 80% within about half an hour. But we only have at the moment USB chargers in the van, which are obviously only giving us a very trickle amount of power. So I can maybe use up 50% of the battery on the iPad in a couple of hours, but that would actually take me several hours to replenish. So not as impressed as I thought I was going to be, but it's certainly helping out to sort of preserve a lot of the battery life on the MacBook. Right, well, before this iPhone really does blow up because of the lack of light, I guess I'll wrap things up there, but say just a very high level overview of my own workflow using Lightroom Mobile and Lightroom on the MacBook, the good, the bad, and the damn frustrating. Give us local sync, please, Adobe. Right guys, well once again, thanks a lot for following along, and I guess we'll catch up tomorrow from, I guess it'll be Tullymore Forest. See you then. Bye bye.